Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Let's talk first about the Manchester attack. Did we learn anything from this?
Well, I think so. This is a foreign fighter travel case. It's not a lone wolf case, so it involves a network, a cell, a little more sophisticated in terms of explosive devices that were made, and also the fact that there's a network there. I think the lesson learned here is travel, the fact that as we squeeze the caliphate in Iraq and Syria, we're going to have more and more of these foreign fighter types coming back to where they came from, in this case, Europe. And our concern from a homeland standpoint is that they're one flight away from coming into the United States. So that's our biggest safeguard, is to try to prevent this foreign fighter travel back into the United States.
What are some things that Congress can do to help protect from that, or is it all through the executive branch?
No, well, I formed a task force on my committee. Last Congress, we had a task force that developed the visa waiver security bill that we passed out of the Congress. So we're going to be looking at foreign fighter travel. How can we prevent terrorists from coming into the United States? To make recommendations both to the executive branch, but also to pass laws out of the Congress. A lot of this stuff, you really have to change the laws to protect Americans.
And would that be more of kind of things you can and can't take on planes? Is this who can fly? What are your thoughts on this specific?
Well, a lot of, and a lot of it also is making sure that European standards are up to par with the United States standards. Right now, they're not. Right now, I think Europe is wide open to these types of attacks. They've had about 10,000 foreign fighters that have gone to the region to fight, and then many have come back, and they don't have the same airline safety measures that we have, watch lists, that sort of thing. So we're trying to develop a more robust security standard in Europe, which in turn will protect the United States.
Where do you gauge that relationship between us and our European allies, and especially because they're such an integral part in the fight on terrorism? They're one flight away from us. What do you think? I mean, was that a constructive trip, or is it kind of a negative time in the relationship?
I think there's a little bit of tension, strain to the relationship. But when I was over visiting with our European NATO partners, I emphasized how important NATO is to the United States, particularly, as I visited, the sort of Eastern Bloc countries of the former Soviet Union. And so I think it's important that we assure them that we are a reliable ally. I think what the president was trying to demonstrate was that they need to pay their fair share, that we pay a lot into NATO, and so do they, and also that they need a counterterrorism mission. And when I was at NATO, we talked about that very aspect, that they should have a counterterrorism mission, which they actually want to develop. And I think the president is leading on that particular issue. I think that's a smart thing.
And how do we know who these people are?
Well, that's a hard thing to do. I mean, this Manchester bomber was on the radar, dropped off, but when you have thousands of these cases you have to prioritize, and you don't have the resources to put everybody under surveillance, and you may not have the legal prerequisite to do that. So it's a challenge, and I think the threat level is increasing, particularly in Europe, and so we want to do everything we can to help them. I mean, one good example is passenger name recognition, to have the passenger lists. I mean, for so long, the European Union, Europe didn't track who was on these airplanes, and now we've working with them, they finally have legislation to change that procedure. I think things like that and watch lists with respect to airplanes, but then the flow of foreign fighters that can come through, Syria into Turkey and then into Europe. That's something we've worked very closely with Turkey on, to try to close off that pipeline of free travel back and forth.
When it comes to cybersecurity, what's the next big hurdle that you think we need to do for policy?
I think deterrence. We don't have it. There's no deterrence standard out there. We don't have international norms and standards. So, I mean, if you think about it, the Chinese stole 20 million security clearances from the federal government, including mine. We had this ransomware attack just recently involving, Russia and China and really half the world that took place. We've had the CIA hacked into, the NSA, and yet we don't seem to have any real consequences to those actions. And so I worry about cyber. We're very good at our offensive capability. Where we're a little bit vulnerable is our defensive capability. It's an ever-evolving threat, and our foreign adversaries are getting very good at this game.
Are you all in your committee taking that up as an issue? Any bills that I should be watching?
Yeah, in fact, it's my intention to pass legislation to create a cyber security agency within the Department of Homeland Security. The military stands up in a time of war, has offensive capability, but in terms of defense, the Department of Homeland Security is a civilian agency to the private sector to help better harden the networks and protect them. I mean, imagine a power grid going down, a financial sector being attacked, banks, Wall Street, energy. There's so many aspects that could be impacted by a cyber attack, not to mention just the everyday theft of intellectual property and criminal activity that takes place on them.
Allegations of Trump-Russia connections on the campaign. Do you worry about that? I mean, what do you think that's an issue?
Well, yeah, we don't know what's there, right? So I think the appointment of Bob Mueller as special counsel was I commended that, applauded that. Bob Mueller, I've known him when he was FBI director, when I worked in the Justice Department, has tremendous integrity and respect. I know that he will carry out a full investigation that's thorough, that's professional, and get to the bottom of this. I think we need to take the politics out of this one and have a serious investigation, and then get to the bottom. I think the American people deserve to know what really happened, and it may not be anything, or maybe something, but we won't know until that investigation is done.
And it's pretty important that he's kind of looked at as nonpartisan, right? I mean, this is kind of a bipartisan decision. Everybody says, yes, this is a good person to look into this.
And I think that's why on both sides of the aisle, they respect that decision. They respect him. He's not political. I think that was very important to appoint somebody who has no political tie or baggage, and someone who served professionally as the FBI director for so many years. I can't think of a better person to be doing this. And I know that he'll be taking a lot of the FBI team with him to investigate this. And, again, I think Congress, the American people, deserve to know what happened. But it also takes the distraction off the table, I think. At least I hope so, because we have a lot to do in the Congress this year, tackling health care reform, tax reform, and the issues I work on, and that's border security and security for the nation from terrorism.
You supported the repeal and replace plan. Why was that so important to you?
Well, because I felt like Obamacare was failing. It was getting ready to implode. It is imploding. Premiums are going up, and yet the choice of healthcare providers is going down. It's not market-based and incentivized. It's government-run. It's on a trajectory of failure, and I felt like we had a responsibility to the American people to fix it so that more Americans don't get hurt in the process. I mean, I talk to my constituents, their premiums have gone up, deductibles have gone up, and their choice of health care has gone down. In fact, maybe they've lost their original health care plan and have had to go to another one.
Does the CBO numbers worry you at all?
It does, but I don't think it takes fully into account what these reforms will mean for choice and competition within the marketplace and bringing down premiums. The one thing CBO score did indicate was that this will lower premiums.
Is there a difference in attitude or goals or kind of measures that now the Republican Party is kind of in the driver's seat on all three?
Well, there's a lot of expectation, a lot of responsibility that comes with that. And I think, above all, I think we view this as a real opportunity that we can't squander. We have a very short window of time to get our agenda passed and signed into law, and we don't want to fail. When I first got elected, Bush was in the White House, and we had a narrow majority in the Senate that we then lost. But I think we lost some opportunities back then. I don't want to see that same thing happen this time around. And I think the members understand that we have to get this agenda done. You know, we passed our health care bill. Maybe it's not perfect, but it's in, you know, it's a start in the right direction. The Senate has it now in their hands, and then the tax reform piece is coupled to that. We've got to get the health care piece done first, then we'll get the tax reform. I'm working on a border security bill, and you know, all these things we realize is a great opportunity, but if we don't, we do have a small window in period of time to get it done.
Wall going to happen, or do you think that's the best situation, and then is the wall going to happen?
Yeah, I think physical infrastructure works. I've seen that. Border Patrol likes that in the right places. And I think technology has to integrate the physical infrastructure, and then you need the personnel and manpower to respond to the threat, along with good intelligence. And so we did appropriate $1.5 billion to be used primarily for technology purposes, roads down there, which Border Patrol say they desperately need, and also to repair some of the fencing down there. You know, on the physical, you know, here in Texas, when I went down to McAllen in the Valley, Hidalgo County, they advocate very strongly for this concrete levee wall because it protects them from flood. It's a flood protection barrier that actually does act as a physical barrier as well. And so those are kind of creative ideas I think we should be looking at. You know, I talked to the Secretary about this. John Cornyn and I are working on a bill, you know, right now to address a lot of these problems.
Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks for having me.